Welcome, everyone, to 2025 Unfiltered, no-nonsense insights from marketers. Today's discussion is powered by StackAdapt, a leader in advertising and a platform that's built for the bold. Known for driving innovation with AI, StackAdapt helps marketers stay ahead of the curve by delivering precision, speed, and results across channels like connected TV, native, display, and more. So today's webinar is not about fluff. We're here to talk about trends that are shaping 2025. We're here to talk a little bit about what we predicted for 2024 and what actually happened and what didn't. And we're here to help you make smarter, data-driven decisions in digital advertising. So let's dive in. Let's talk about what all of this means for you as marketers. We'll do some introductions to kick things off. So my name is Shiv. Nice to meet you all. A little background on myself. I've been in the digital ad space for almost 20 years. At companies like AOL and Criteo. I started U of Digital in 2018. We provide education and training to the ad tech and martech industries. And we've been around for about 7 years now. So we're just out there trying to help the industry grow and learn. But more important than myself, we have some great panelists today. So we have Anna, who is SVP of Client Services at StackAdapt. She's a programmatic pro with experience at companies like Google, Amazon, and the OG ad tech company, MediaMath. We also have Paul Verna. He's the VP of Content at EMARKETER. And obviously, EMARKETER is so prominent in our industry. They're all over the place. I'm sure you recognize their charts. Any place you see them. Paul's insights have graced Wall Street Journal, New York Times, NPR, and many, many more outlets and trade publications. And finally, last but not least, we have Digital Chadvertising, the industry's meme king. He's a 2-time Dick Reed Award winner, which I'm not quite sure what that is, but I'll figure it out. He's won awards because he's awesome. And he blends humor with advertising trends. If you don't follow his Instagram account or his social media accounts, please do so immediately. You will not regret it. I want to kick things off by talking a little bit about 2024, what we predicted for 2024, doing a little bit of a scorecard, calling hits and misses so that we can reflect and inform our conversation about 2025. So we're going to go through 4 of the predictions that we made in 2024, starting with AI, right? So we were already talking about AI in a big way going into 2024. And one of the predictions we made was that AI will define winning campaigns. We said that organizations that adopt AI for campaign optimization and real-time targeting will gain an advantage in the digital landscape. So let's reflect. Did that happen? Did that not happen? What came true? And we like to think that, here's the drum roll, we think that it came true, right? So we think that AI in 2024 and now looking back at the year, we think AI is now already delivering precision, speed, higher ROI across the board, across many different types of platforms and campaigns and advertisers. It's obviously been transformative in certain pockets in certain areas. And overall, it's just improved the efficiency of how we do business, right? And if we think more tactically, it's improved how we run campaigns. It's improved how we drive outcomes from advertising. And it's generally just raised the bar of expectations in the space. And so at a high level, I think this was a hit. Paul, I'd love to actually get your quick insights on, there was an article in eMarketer about AI's impact on the industry. Any kind of quick tidbits to add there?
It's still a moving target. I think when AI first burst onto public consciousness close to 2 years ago, the vibe was mostly about, okay, this is going to revolutionize content creation. Not a lot of attention was focused on some of the other parts of the advertising value chain. What we've seen since then is the data shows a lot of impact right across the board. So like Boston Consulting Group, in a survey they did, content creation actually came out as the biggest impact. But other studies are, obviously surveying their user bases in slightly different ways, but things like personalization, campaign optimization, and measurement come up a lot. So I think it's too early to call and say, it's going to be one of these things predominantly. I think it's going to be all of them in tandem going forward, frankly.
That's great, Paul. And that's a little bit of a hint about what we're going to be talking about for 2025 trends. So thank you for planting that seed. So let's go to the next prediction that we made. which was third-party data will be a thing of the past. Cookies will be phased out by the end of the year. And first, companies that are not leveraging first-party data in order to de-risk themselves from third-party data are going to fall behind on things like personalization, relevant advertising, and they're going to miss out on meaningful consumer connections. So let's see, did we miss or hit on that? Drum roll, please. I think we kind of missed, right? Google once again delayed the death of the cookie, as we all know. And we still are waiting to hear from Google what the next steps are going to be with Chrome and third-party cookies. And third-party cookie is still here, right? You could make an argument that it is dying a slow death, but it is still here. Advertisers still rely on cookie data tremendously in our space. And so I think we can say safely that at least for 2024, this was a myth. Let's go to our third one. So we predicted that attention metrics will kind of render viewability obsolete. And tracking genuine attention and emotional engagement would make viewability a thing of the past, which I think directionally makes sense. But did we hit on that or did we miss on that? Let's see. Drum roll, please. I think we hit on that. So there was actually some data that came out. Attention metrics actually eclipsed viewability in 2024 in terms of popularity. Again, directionally, it just makes a lot of sense. Viewability is a little bit antiquated. Viewability actually lends itself to things like made for advertising sites, whereas attention goes to the next level of tracking efficacy, right? Are people actually paying attention to the ads, not just able to view them, but are they actually paying attention? Do they actually care? And so I think this was a hit. There's some good quotes here on the slide. Already adopted across popular channels like CTV and social media. Attention metrics are gaining traction for things like in-game, digital out of home, and even audio. I think also with video in particular, because video is so big, viewability used to be huge. But as signals go away, as cookies go away, as it's harder and harder to track in CTV, in video, attention kind of rises to the top as well, because it doesn't necessarily rely on some of those signals. And so I think this was a hit. And then I think we have one more. So connected TV will outshine linear TV for good. We predicted this back before 2024. We said CTV should continue to capture linear TV's ad dollars, assert its dominance as the channel of choice, especially for political campaigns. So drum roll, please. What do we think do we hit or miss? I think we kind of missed a little bit. This one's a little wishy-washy. You could say, CTV from a consumer perspective definitely took over and definitely has zoomed ahead of linear TV. But linear TV still holds a lot of the ad dollars, right? And it's got a stranglehold on those ad dollars for a variety of different reasons, right? It's live viewing. It is cost. It is inertia, frankly, from across the ecosystem that has kept those dollars locked up. And so, we'll see where things go. I think the election was interesting and the political cycle was interesting. I think that did kind of create a big tailwind for CTV. And CTV is obviously growing massively, but I think the dollars are still a little slow to follow. And we'll see how that kind of all plays itself out in 2025 and beyond. So with that, with our kind of reflection, it's a perfect time to now start talking about what we think is going to happen in 2025. So we'll kill the slides. We'll have a little bit more of an open conversation with our fantastic panelists here. And what I want to do is open up the conversation with a discussion about AI, because that is top of mind for everybody. That's how we started calling balls and strikes with the 2024 reflection. So let's start there. 2024, we saw so much happen, right? And Paul, you touched on some of this already. From the silly Coca-Cola ad that everyone likes to talk about. I think that was like a lightning in the bottle moment for AI. I don't know if folks are familiar with Performance Max, like Google going aggressively into the space with tools like Performance Max and Facebook, and pretty much every walled garden now having some kind of AI-driven buying tool. It's a big year for AI. And so my question for the panelists, and let's start with Anna, if that's okay with you. I'd love to hear from you, Anna, and then we'll go around the panel. How are we going to see AI kind of play out in 2025? Where will it have maybe the greatest impact? Will it be more in planning? Will it be more in the creative space? We've talked, Paul touched on this. We always thought that AI would impact creative the most. But where do you think you're going to see the most impact of AI in the ecosystem in 2025?
Yeah, thank you, Shiv. And first of all, so excited to be here together with Paul, Shiv, and Chad, and talk about some of the insights and predictions for 2025. Going back to AI, I think AI actually has been with us for many, many years. Like, even if you go to the core of what programmatic is, it's about automation, it's about AI. We may have used different words in the past for AI, maybe automation, maybe ML, and now we are using more and more of the generative AI and LLMs as part of their repertoire. So it's great to see. I believe it's still the very beginning. We're just scratching the surface because, it takes time. One, to bring the talent that is able to inform the organization, either a brand or an advertiser or a vendor or a partner, how to use AI in the most meaningful and useful way. It takes time to integrate. It takes time to train your team, either in an agency or whatever your job is, not only in the data science and analytics. So I think we only going to see the 10x impact of AI in the upcoming years. I think 2025 is going to be critical there. Where are we going to see it? I believe across. Paul, you mentioned a little bit earlier. I think it's going to be part of planning. It's going to be part of the execution, as well as the overall, post-campaign, post-activation analysis and informing the strategy. I believe the biggest impact is going to be within the insights area, because that's what impacts all of these, around the full life cycle of a campaign or activation. And smart data and smart insights really focus on outcomes and really focus on what are you trying to drive as a marketer, being upper funnel or lower funnel. That's where we're gonna see it. I believe those who have invested in AI this year or the prior year are going to see probably the most benefit. And probably my advice would be, don't wait too much, because it takes time. And in order to see the true impact, it takes a little bit of the integration or retraining on how do you look at the data as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Anna. So you're putting your bet on insights, outcomes, measurements, I'd say, generally speaking. Digital advertising. Let's go to you next. Do you agree with Anna? Do you have a different take on AI's impact on advertising in 2025?
But yeah, no, I absolutely agree with Anna. Just everything that exists in the advertising industry, I think we can all agree that there's going to be like a massive impact, like full spectrum, just with the advent of generative AI. And I think, like, to add to Anna's point, some of the more mundane aspects, like aligning taxonomy, it's not really the most glamorous aspect of advertising, but those are some of those little pitfalls where, one missing like character can completely create like a incomplete view of a campaign, and then you're unable to analyze that and cross-reference that. There's also other things too, where if you're running a global campaign and you need to expedite the localization of something, having generative AI kind of expedite the entire replication of that instead of having to send credit feedback back and forth, get these translations going, create all the entire different set of taxonomy, and just launching it locally. I think like AI can help kind of expand, I guess, like the frequency of how we can execute smaller markets from like a larger campaign idea.
Love that. Okay, let's go, Paul, to you last. Any hot takes here? Any zig while these guys are zagging on AI's impact on the industry in 2025?
I agree with Anna and Chad on their insights. I don't have a contrarian point of view, but I will add that the biggest advertising story of the year and of next year may be the proposed merger between Omnicom and IPG, and AI is a subtext in that merger. I think this is a lot about leveraging those capabilities. I think we're going to actually get to a point where the bigger generative AI becomes as part of the mix, the less we're going to talk about it as its own thing, and the more it's just going to be ingrained into processes, into ideas, into the whole workflow of digital advertising. There's no question that the impacts are going to be huge and right across the board, though I think, and I wouldn't argue that insights is maybe a core area, because there are a lot of good reasons for that. But I think we're definitely, we're in a new world. I also agree that AI has been around for a lot longer than ChatGPT sort of bursting on the scene and getting a lot of attention in the public about it. But there has been a sea change in the types of AI that we're using and the way it's rolled out in consumer-facing places like, internet searches, Google searches. So, yeah, it's going to be pervasive, and I think it'll be very interesting to see exactly, how it plays out, and also how the industry navigates some of the pitfalls and risks, which, are not negligible.
Love it.
Maybe
Awesome answers. No, I love it. Awesome answers across the board. Let's move to our next topic, which is about channels. So I think in 2024, we started seeing kind of an explosion of new emerging channels and really the adoption of those channels. I think a lot of these channels have existed for a while, but the adoption really started accelerating of channels like digital out of home, streaming audio. Obviously, connected TV is a rocket ship right now. And so there's so many new channels out there that the mix has just gotten pretty complicated and pretty robust. And so thinking about 2025, where do we think, and we'll start with you this time, Paul, we'll reverse the order. Where do we think, like which channels do we expect to really pop? Maybe some new channels, or do we expect kind of digital out of home, CTV, audio to continue to be rocket ships? We'd love your thoughts on just channel mix and what to expect in 2025.
Yeah, I think digital out of home is certainly on a pretty healthy growth trajectory. We expect at least 10% year-to-year increases for the next 2 years. And it's certainly outpacing general out of home spending, right? So all of out of home is becoming more and more digital, which obviously speaks to the programmatic capabilities. Definitely CTV. I don't think there's any argument. I think you mentioned about the political advertising where it has made huge inroads in this past year compared to 2020, but CTV is making big inroads across the board. It is still, in our estimates, for U.S. spending, it's roughly half of linear TV. So I think, Shiv, that speaks to your point earlier about maybe missing that prediction in the sense that TV still makes up the bulk of it, but there's no question where those trends are going. And actually, by the end of our forecast horizon in 2028, we expect GTV and linear TV advertising to be somewhat at parity. So they're going from like a 2-to-1 ratio to 1-to-1 in that space of time. The one we haven't touched on that I think is worth mentioning is retail media. Retail media is complex, and we could spend a lot of time talking about what it is, what it isn't, what companies are part of the spectrum, how it's starting to morph into things like CTV with, Amazon obviously being the big leader in retail media, but also now having its own ad tier and doing more and more sports content, which is all ad supported. But when it comes to just top line spending, retail media is the fastest growing ad format that we track. And speaking of linear TV, this year, linear TV is bigger than retail media. Again, this is US, and we don't have enough forecasting for every region in the world to have a true global estimate right now. By next year, retail media will surpass linear TV by quite a long shot, and within a few years, it'll be about double. So that just gives you an indication. Obviously, that's partly a function of the decrease in traditional TV advertising, but also just the incredible growth trajectory of retail media.
Paul, I have a follow-up question for you there. So I think sometimes, classic digital advertising issue is how do we define things, right? And it's interesting to hear you talk about retail media as a channel, right? Because my mind doesn't immediately go there, but I understand why you may think that. So just quick clarifying question. We don't have to spend a lot of time on this, but because retail media, it does encompass CTV and you can run retail media ads in a lot of different channels. How should marketers be kind of thinking about retail media from a channel perspective? Like, is it a channel that you kind of juxtaposition next to other channels? Or is it more of, let's say a strategy, right? Or a data approach? So just, interested to hear your thoughts on how marketers should be thinking about it as they plan for 2025.
Yeah, that's a very good question. There's a lot of overlap between retail media and search and between retail media and CTV. So they're not discrete, distinct categories. And when we forecast, we have to be very careful in spelling out what that forecast encompasses. In the case of our retail media top line numbers, they include parts of it that are basically search and parts of it that are CTV. So I think for clients, it might depend on where you're coming at it from or what type of business you're running. And I think from conversations I've had, the answer varies. Like in some cases, they do think of it as a channel, but in some cases, it's more of a strategy. And that strategy is deeply informed by the availability of that first party data and what it can empower within your, your marketing stack. But I think it, teasing those out is tricky, and it's probably only going to get trickier because the more retail media starts to spread out into non-retail categories like financial services and travel. All of those companies, or many of those companies, are now selling media the way retailers are. So now it's really more commerce media. So between trying to separate what is retail media, what isn't. Now you also have to take into consideration, okay, is it actually, we call it retail media, but should we be calling it commerce media? So there are a lot of, and I'm sorry to not give you like a super clear answer that has, like a action item or a clear takeaway, but it is a very muddled world. We just know that the spending toward, whether you call it retail or commerce media, is increasing quite substantially, caveats in mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I would say commerce media is probably a good way to go just moving forward because there's so many other verticals now, to your point. And I would say, yeah, like think about it as a data strategy, and then let the channels kind of trickle out from that. Might be a good takeaway for this group. But we're gonna circle back. We're gonna come back to commerce media because it is so hot. It is so important. I promise you, we're gonna come back to that one. Let's go to digital advertising next. So, would love to hear from you about just channels in 2025. What should we expect? Is there going to be a new one on the block? Is there one kind of coming up already behind us that we're not paying attention to? Any predictions? Any thoughts? Digital advertising.
Yeah, so I think like with the advent of generative AI, where people are just starting to interact with these AI platforms themselves, I think there's kind of like the elephant in the room where that is also just a kind of another channel for advertising. And we're probably going to see in the same vein of like paid search marketing, where any kind of like user intent is triggered, can provide like a paid placement. So there's that. There's also, I think, AI wearables just kind of coming up in the market. I'm not sure how ads on a smart glass device will work, but I think that there's going to probably be that in the near future as well. But for the most part, I think like social media itself is kind of where I think a lot of sour conversations are happening, which kind of in the attention economy that we currently live in, it's just going to be inevitable that's going to be probably just a massive opportunity for just different areas, and how they're executed will kind of depend on what the platform provides and local data privacy regulations that also just kind of change throughout the years as well.
Yeah, I love that. I think the point about ads in AI, it's already happening, right? So Perplexity, one of the leading kind of AI driven search engines, has introduced ads. And so that's fascinating, right? Even Google with their AI answers or their AI suggestions now, when you type something into Google search, they're going to start running ads next to that. And so it's already happening. It's going to be a massive new channel as AI just explodes as a consumer facing product. So I really like that one, advertising. Okay. Anna, last but not least, you have the tough job of making some kind of prediction or hot take after Paul and after digital advertising. Anything else to add about new channels or things to keep an eye on in 2025?
Yeah, I think I would add to the kind of creative using AI and AI using creative. I think we're going to see that marriage in kind of both directions more and more. I think we're still going to see all the channels we see today, but maybe in a slightly evolved version. Especially when I think about digital out of home and how creative can you be with some of the venues that you have. The Sphere in Las Vegas, we see some of the new activations. Like they're very inspiring. They are big moments. They are the breakthrough kind of innovation for marketers. I think we're going to see more and more of these. And then how do you follow on the other channels around them, either within the moment or are like your sequencing of messaging and the reinforcement of what you want to share or influence. I think that's going to be very exciting. I mean, CTV and political, we've seen, huge growth was very, very exciting. I think the more focus on sports, events, concerts, like the content type that we see and that people engage with your favorite artists, with your favorite sports. I think that's where we're going to see a lot of innovation as well. And then I would say in gaming, it's a big one. I think that we made some progress in there. It's such a huge industry. Also makes me a little bit nervous as a mom of teenage twins, and where I see how advertising is influencing them in the moment where they don't even realize what that is. I think it's exciting. We have to be just very careful. How do we navigate just knowing about the demographic of that as well? But I would see that's where we're going to see the more creativity, and that's where we engage like as consumers. And that's what makes me very, very, very excited about those innovations, how I'm going to get surprised and excited by the creatives that I'm going to engage with next year.
I love that. Yeah, in-game. Great shout out for in-game advertising. Definitely a new channel, something that's blowing up. And so we got a lot of good answers from the group here. In-game, AI, obviously CTV, digital out of home, retail media. So much to be excited about going to 2025.
And I throw another quick wrench in there. I know we're going to move on to another topic, but I would be remiss if we didn't mention the creator economy as another major channel. Something that we see spending rising quite dramatically in, and the revenue streams within the creator economy are diverging, and many of them growing quite significantly. Not giant in terms of dollar volume just yet, but we expect that whole economy to essentially double in the next few years. So, and it's also filtering over into a lot of brand strategies that go beyond just, working with an influencer on a specific campaign. So maybe a topic for another webinar down the road, but I did want to throw that in.
That's a good one. No, that's a good last minute addition. I think what's interesting about new emerging channels is there's so much opportunity, right? There's so many new areas where advertisers can get creative. There's new canvases. There's new ways to reach people. I also think that represents a challenge, right? Of like, how do you wrangle all of that? How do you bring it all together in one place? How do you buy it efficiently? How are you knowledgeable enough about these channels to do it and execute on it effectively? And I do think like working with certain types of platforms that take more of that omni-channel approach is smart, right? For a marketer to be able to kind of push the easy button a little bit. Like there is no real easy button for this industry, and especially right now. But if you have a little bit of an easy button with a platform that brings it all into one place for you, I think that helps, and that goes a long way. Okay, let's pivot. So I also now want to talk about measurement. Like I think measurement obviously is such a critical part of what we do in our industry. And it has changed, it has evolved, it continues to evolve. We talked a little bit about calling balls and strikes earlier about attention measurement kind of taking over maybe for viewability. I think that trajectory probably will continue moving into 2025. But if we zoom out a little bit and we think about measurement at a high level, I'd love to hear your takes on kind of where are we going, right, with the evolution of measurement. I think right now we have two kind of opposing forces as it pertains to measurement. So kind of force number one is marketers want more. They always want more, right? And they should. They want more granularity in their data. They want more specificity. They want more precision. They want to be able to more accurately tell what is working and what is not. And that is one force that is always going to pull in that direction. The opposing force is signal loss, right? So the fact that we're losing data, the fact that cookies are going away potentially, the whole privacy movement, I think, is making measurement harder and harder and harder. So we kind of have these two opposing forces. And I think what that makes for is a great panel discussion, a great panel question. And so I want to start with you, digital advertising. Like, what do you see happening with this evolution of measurement in 2025? Are there going to be new metrics that kind of pull forward? Are there going to be other metrics that kind of just start dying off because they're no longer relevant for whatever reason? Any predictions for 2025 around measurement?
Yeah, I think like with new metrics evolving, that's kind of likely to happen now. We just don't know what the technology is yet, but whenever that does happen, we always just use this new capability. I think like being able to track like eyeballs on a screen was something I did not even knew existed until it does. But really exciting for that to see that kind of go down. But In terms of like legacy metrics, I think like they'll probably just kind of be, if not totally sunset, they will probably serve as like a secondary data point or a complementary set. Really with multi-touch attribution, everyone has a debate whether it's like alive or dead, but I think it's just one of those things that's just kind of a perpetual moving target within the industry. And you're better equipped to lend a bullseye when you just have more data points. And that kind of also is reliant on what tools are provided when the data and landscape and media landscape just keeps constantly evolving.
That's great. Those are great points. Anna, let's go to you next. Any thoughts on measurement?
Yeah, I was laughing a little bit because it seems like it's going to be the 15th year of attribution in digital advertising, and this is a hot topic every year. I think I'm always excited when we see a little bit of new metrics popping up, and they enhance the view and enhance how we can really get the signals from consumers on what's working, what's not working across different channels and the different parts of the funnel. I think multi-touch will continue. I think where do we use multi-touch though, it's going to change a little bit, right? Like I hope we're going to see finally a little bit more move from like click to really the true outcomes, this being ROAS and really being, lead generation or whatever that is in your outcome-based marketing. I really hope that's going to be, I see, with the clients that we work with, more and more focus on customer lifetime value, which I believe is so, so key. Really measuring this. It's tricky. You need the signals, you need modeling, you really need to get good at understanding your data. We have access to so much data. I think it's just how we use it, and sometimes less is more. Like just start with something, test and iterate, and that's going to give you way more than just looking at your CTRs or CPCs. That would be, that's what I think we're going to see. I don't think the new metrics are going to replace. I think they're just going to be plugged into some of the attribution models. But my hope really is to move beyond the click in 2025, finally.
Hopefully. Yeah, you're 15, right? 20 of us trying to move beyond the click. I think, a point that you made that I agree with and I think is really important is, especially as we lose data, as we kind of deal with signal loss, having multiple ways of measuring and then plugging those things in together into a larger model is definitely the way forward. And so, there's this new term out there that folks like to use, unified measurements, right? In a world where each kind of form of measurement is getting a little flimsier and a little weaker because of data loss. You need more types of measurement. You need to triangulate across multiple methodologies in order to actually get to the truth. And so, and I think you're making a great point. Like, yes, there will be new metrics, but ultimately they should be plugged in and laddered up to a kind of broader view of what's working and what isn't. Paul, anything to add on the measurement front?
Yeah, I find it interesting and maybe somewhat distressing that the two biggest areas of advertising revenue are ones where measurement is kind of a mess, and one is CTV, the other is retail media. So in CTV, we're going from a world in which there was a standard currency on the linear side that, for many good reasons, the whole ecosystem felt, everybody could do better. But the world we're in now is there are just a lot of alternatives and nothing is quite catching hold as, a de facto standard. There probably won't be a standard, but marketers do need a way to measure across different platforms. Right now, we're in a state of flux in CTV. I think with retail media, we're maybe even at an earlier stage of maturation where there hasn't been a standard to begin with. And most of the retail media networks are essentially walled gardens or something like a walled garden. So that complicates things when you're trying to standardize a measurement that as a marketer, you're going to be able to apply to your campaign, regardless of what platform your ads are running on. But I think those are two big challenges that the industry has to overcome. And of course, all of that is against the backdrop that you mentioned, Shiv, which is that privacy overhangs everything right now, and it makes things a lot more difficult than they used to be when people were not nearly as privacy-centric and when third-party cookies were the law of the land. So we're in a world where whether Google pulls, cookies out completely from Chrome or not, or, has another 2-year deadline looming. I think the writing is on the wall that we're moving away from a cookie-centric world, and we actually have data that shows that in some future, we don't know exactly when, but probably 90% of all U.S. ad inventory will be non-cookied, regardless of what Google actually decides. So it's a new world that we're all in, and I think I don't think anybody expects the kind of standardization that we had with, say, a Nielsen, but somewhere there has to be a move toward normalizing some of these, or having a currency that people can agree on, so that you basically can compare apples to apples across your ad expenditures.
Great points, Paul. And I love that you highlighted kind of the difficulty of measurement in a CTV, in some of these new emerging channels that we talked about earlier. Great opportunity, also a difficult challenge. And so great point. And actually, you mentioned Google, you mentioned cookies. So this is a great segue. I want to do a quick lightning round here, a little hot take lightning round. So do we think Google's delay of cookie deprecation is good or bad for the industry? So I just want a quick good, maybe a quick one-liner, or bad and a quick one-liner. We'll go around roundtable. Anna, we'll start with you. Good or bad? Why?
I'd say there is goodness in there because it allows all the marketers to spend a little bit more time on testing and getting ready. So they are, more informed and more ready to get there. There's also an opportunity to learn while you can. Like now you have all the cookie data. There's a ton of stuff that doesn't actually change that much that you have to do in a quick loop or a quick attribution window. But you should really get those insights now and then just recheck once, cookies go away, partially or fully, and just to see what's changing.
Awesome. Digital advertising. Let's go to you. Good or bad? And why?
I think it's good, mainly because of the fact that still having third-party cookies proliferate makes advertisers less reliant on walled garden systems.
That was very good. Concise, easy to understand. Totally get it. Paul, last but not least, good or bad, and why?
I think there's good and bad. On the good, I agree that the good is, that there's more time now to continue testing and experimenting. But I would counter that we have had 4 or 5 years to do that. So at some point, you got to basically say, okay, let's make it work. Yeah. So I don't know if having another 2 years is actually healthy for the ecosystem. It's certainly good for those who haven't really prepared fully or who are still experimenting. But again, that's been a long train.
Yeah. And for what it's worth, Paul, I agree with you. I think it's bad. I think we're just delaying the inevitable. We're all just kind of, stalling. And that, I think, slows down industry progress. Rip the Band-Aid. It's time to move on and innovate into the future. Okay. I want to pose a question specifically to digital advertising, then we'll kind of go to the other panelists from there. But the reason I want to start with you is because digital advertising, you have some of the, you basically break news about the agency world on your social accounts time and time again, which is incredible. I don't know where you get your intel from. I don't know how you're so well connected, but just, being someone that's so well connected, kind of understanding what's happening within the walls of the agencies. There is so much going on in the agency space, especially with the Omnicom and IPG potential merger, AI just revolutionizing and maybe impacting those agency businesses tremendously looking into 2025. What is the sentiment in agency land? How are people feeling? Do they believe that the agency model is tenable, or is the agency model going to fall apart? How do they have to reinvent how they're going to do business? I'd love your thoughts, just, especially with this IPG Omnicom merger now hanging over the agency space. How should we be thinking about agencies in 2025 and beyond?
Oh, yeah. So, I think the general sentiment that there's a lot of trepidation amongst the agency side. A lot of the issues that kind of range from, certain social media platforms possibly being banned by the United States government, the advent of generative AI making certain roles obsolete, And also I think just like the elephant in the room, like the IPG, Omnicom merger, it all points to a singular sentiment of workforce reduction. Because I think a lot of people are just starting to wonder, like, what's my position? What's my role in the industry? And that kind of I think that's where a lot of people are just kind of worried about, especially with how we've seen just like the layoffs happen almost like nonstop for the last 18 months. I think it was like summer 2022 when the first major wave of workforce reductions to the agency side occurred. And I was able to create like a lot of content and memes, and there's a lot of stories around it. But the weird thing is that it hasn't really tapered off since. So with the merger possibly happening sometime next month, there's also just a lot of concern about that as well too. It does obviously address, not address, but it does kind of provide like a lot of questions like, is this model sustainable? I don't know if that's really fair to, I guess, think about at the time, but I know that there's a trend where brands and clients are becoming more reliant on platforms, which almost kind of bypasses the agency model. So I think like that kind of begs a lot of questions for, how does the agency reinvent itself when there's more competition from these platforms? And when you have an AI company positioning itself as an ad tech platform or provider, I think that also throws another wrench in the wheel as well too.
100%. Yeah, I think like big tech companies, right? The Googles, the Metas of the world, they're looking at the agency business. They're looking at the revenue. They're looking at the margin as their potential opportunity, right? And when they go to market with an Performance Max type of product or a Advantage Plus type of product, in the back of their minds, they're thinking, okay, well, this is us potentially kind of taking some of that margin from the agency business and reallocating it to the technology that we've built in the form of AI, right? So 100% agree with that take. Paul, let's go to you next. Any thoughts on, what we should be looking at, what we should be thinking about in terms of agency evolution in 2025?
What I would add to the conversation is actual data that supports what digital advertising was saying about platforms basically encroaching on the agency, on agency revenues. And this is from Advertiser Perception. So they found that as of Q1 of this year, of 2024, big holding company billings are down quite a bit from when they started tracking them in 2019. So in 2019, something like 45% of all billings went to holding companies. And now that's below 30%. So it's going from like 45% to 30%. Independent agencies are staying sort of close to the share that they had in that time span. But where we see the biggest growth is in this brand direct spending, which does go, a lot of it obviously goes directly to platforms like Google and social platforms. So there we saw that back in 2019, those billings made up less than 10% of the total, and now they make up almost 30%. So we're essentially seeing a shift in spending going away from holding companies toward, direct spending on platforms. So I think this is a real thing. This is a lot of what's causing nervousness in the agency world. I think it's part of what's driving consolidation and what's driving them to try to claw back some of this revenue with things like AI capabilities and other competencies that, that they can probably bring to the table and try to re-energize that relationship with their marketer clients.
Yeah, that's it. Those are some really good points. Anna, let's close with you on the agency topic. Any thoughts to add?
Yeah, I think it all comes down to the value that either an agency or platform or your partner creates for you compared to the level of effort needed being in your, the people that need to, focus on the jobs to be done or the cost of the platform as well. And I think as long as we know what the value is for the brand or for the agency, and we really focus on this and don't create like too much disruption. I know there's sometimes stuff like, oh, let's do all these different things. And like sometimes again, like less is more that drives the biggest ROAS or the biggest, customer lifetime value or whatever that metric is. And then just a little bit of differentiation, I think, and the ease of partnering or the ease of use is critical, right, to the level of effort. Because sometimes even if you generate amazing ROAS, but it's so difficult to get there, it can get in the way. So I think that's what I would focus on. And then, that kind of both goes to the independent agencies, the bigger ones, as well as platforms.
Love it. Yeah, and I think it's time for the incentive structure to officially, I think, make a transition on the agency side. I think for years and years and years, the structure has been very much focused on manpower and hours of work, and that's how agencies make money. And frankly, I don't know if that's sustainable anymore, right? In the age of AI and the age of technology. And so how will that affect the economics of the agency? How will that affect, the ways in which they go to market, their commercial models, et cetera? I think that's an interesting thing to keep an eye on as well. Okay. So I want to switch to commerce and retail media. I promised we'd come back to that one. It is such a hot topic. It is growing so fast, as Paul pointed out. It is already bigger than CTV by a good chunk. And it will be bigger than, a lot of things the next couple of years. It will be one of the biggest, let's say, channels, or if we want to call it that, one of the biggest strategies in the industry. And so with retail and commerce media exploding, I think it's really interesting to think about kind of the fragmentation of it. I think in any new nascent space, you see fragmentation, you see a rush of interest and investment and new players, and then you see a retraction, right? Or you see consolidation. And so where are we in that phase for retail media, right? Like I go out there and, I'm reading the news all the time. Like I'm seeing all sorts of retailers saying, oh, we now are a media company, right? We are Dollar General, or we are, so-and-so retail store or clothing company. And, every company can't do it. And at some point, like advertisers will burn out and not want to buy ads from every single retailer that's out there. And so what is the end state of this? Or better, let's not talk about the end state. Let's talk about what do we expect in 2025? Do we expect more fragmentation, more players, or do we expect consolidation to start? And what does that maybe look like? So Anna, I want to start with you for this question.
Yeah, I think we're still going to see a ton of fragmentation. I think, as you said, like we see every week, some new RMN or CMN is popping up. I think we're going to see that a lot. We also know it's a real pain point for brands and for agencies, right? Because they don't use necessarily the same currency, the same technology. How do you integrate, and so on? A huge part that agencies and platforms can play actually in making easier to adopt and test and integrate as well. And then I think probably towards the end of the year, like it's a huge opportunity for those mergers, acquisitions, and consolidations. I'm very, very curious who's going to get into the game and earlier in the market as well. So I would say still, early in the year, more and more in fragmentation. And then we're going to see a little bit more integrated strategies. I think to Paul's earlier point, some of it today might be as a data play. Some is still part of your innovation incubation budget. Some other ones may be a new channel in there. We're going to see that more and more integrated in the overall, comm strategy or marketing strategy as well.
Awesome. Yeah, that's an interesting take. You're basically packing in a lot into 2025, a lot of action, fragmentation, then consolidation and integration. I love that. Paul, let's go to you next. What do you think we should expect around commerce, retail, media in 2025?
Well, if you look at the retail media landscape, and this is US data, Amazon controls over 75% and Walmart some 8%. So their combined share is about 85%. So that means that all of the other players that have cropped up, whether they're straight retailers or retail adjacent companies, they're really fighting for 15% of the market for scrap. And that's not sustainable because we don't see anybody taking like a substantial share. We just see that there's this long tail that a lot of companies are now vying for. Some of them have already gone by the wayside. I believe others will have to because it's not a sustainable environment. And along the way, whether that looks like just a shakeout of, the players just kind of like falling by the wayside, or whether it looks more like consolidation, that remains to be seen. But it could be a combination of both. But I don't think there's space for every one of these merchants to basically be media companies. Some of them don't even have the scale to truly make it work. Most of them have very viable first-party data, and that can compensate in some cases for lack of scale. So in other words, if you have an audience where who you're reaching and you can reach them effectively, through commerce media, then you don't necessarily need to have, hundreds of millions of customers. But at the end of the day, it's still a game of, the investment in running these networks are not insignificant, and the returns only work when you do have a certain amount of scale. So, we're definitely going to see more friction in the space.
Agreed. Digital advertising. What do you think is going to happen with commerce and retail media in 2025?
Surprisingly enough, this is one area where I don't have like too much of a strong opinion on it. Just the way things are going, I just feel like, I know, everything just kind of trucking along as it is. But I mean, obviously things will happen when new technologies get introduced. But it's just been one of those areas where it just hasn't really a strongest opinion from me.
Yeah, and I think that's fair, right? It's tough to kind of forecast and engage, and it is early on, and so it's a coin toss on what actually happens next year. I think it's ripe for consolidation. I think it's time for us to start seeing it. We started seeing, Paul, to your point, some of these retailers have already gotten out. They got in and they already got out. I think Gap already has gotten out. They said, hey, no thanks. We don't want anything to do with this. We're out, right? And so it's a hard, advertising is a hard business, a hard competitive business to run, something sustainable with healthy enough margins. And, at some point, a lot of these companies are going to say, hey, listen, yeah, maybe we want to monetize our data and our inventory. We're not going to do it on our own. We're going to integrate with some kind of intermediary or a partner. And again, this is where I think if you're a marketer on this call listening to this, trying to glean some takeaways and action items, I think working with platforms that bring these things into a centralized place, right? Like retail data and inventory, omni-channel data and inventory into a centralized place in order to kind of diversify what you're doing, but do it in a scalable way. I think that's smart. Okay, we are coming to a close here, which is exciting. And so to end things on a little bit of a fun note, I've said the word, I think, hot take like 20 times on this webinar. I'm going to say it one more time. Let's get a hot take from everybody on the panel. This is a good one. So my question for you is, what industry truth, or let's put it around quotations, what industry truth or reality does everyone kind of blindly follow in our space, but it's actually totally BS? And why do we need to stop pretending it's real or it is the truth? Why do we need to call BS on that industry truth? And it could be a technology, it could be a methodology, it could be a term that we use in the space, really anything. But just to end things on a little bit of a fun, controversial note. So who wants to go first? I'm not going to pick. You guys tell me. Okay, Paul's got one.
I'll go first because this one is so easy, Shib. It's a slam dunk for me. Okay. Sustainability. Okay. So sustainability is a noble goal. Every company, every individual should strive toward everything being as sustainable as possible. But I can't tell you how many companies, in fact, almost every company, if you go to their website, they have like a sustainability section or they brag about what they're doing. And then at the same time, I'm getting, mailings from these companies in like super glossy paper, or they're bombarding me with digital marketing, which actually in many cases is more resource intensive than physical mail. And just not a lot of attention is paid to the actual, what's actually going on. And I'm not going to name any companies, but even just the packaging of some of their products just flies in the face of anything they might be striving for when it comes to sustainability. So I'm not saying that anybody should stop focusing on it, but let's do a better job putting our money where our mouth is.
Okay. Sustainability. That's a good hot take. Anna or Chad advertising? Where are we going now?
I can go. I think one of the truths and the focus is like, I need all the data out there in order to inform my, my marketing. Like big data is key. Like, I don't think actually that's the case. Less is more. Smart data, the key data, insights, and getting the insights and recommendation in front of the right decision makers and the right people. That's the key. You don't need more data. You need more insights. That's the myth I'd love to break.
I love that one. That one's so good. Thank you. Okay, digital advertising. Last but not least.
Oh yeah, so this will be fun. I think brand safety probably is what I think a lot of people should probably start questioning. I believe like around like summer 2020, there's a standard practice where you got like pause your ad campaigns when a major black swan event happens, and you don't want to have your ads running concurrent with controversial subjects. But I think like as we kind of understand that like some of the brand safety gaffes that we see are just kind of really self-inflicted, horrible creatives, like the Burger King "Wind Blowing in the Kitchen" thing. That had nothing to do with the news. But like when Russia invaded Ukraine and then like an Applebee's ran and they're trying to sell like chicken wings, like that's not going to make people boycott Applebee's. So, that's kind of my take on it.
Good ones. Oh man, this is hard. I feel like I have to give one too before we close. So I'm going to give one. You may not agree. You may agree. I don't know. Mine is privacy. And what I mean by that is I think that, we all like to say, oh, we really care about user privacy. First of all, in the ad space, most of us just say it. Kind of like sustainability. We say it because we have to say it. But then we go back to our office and we figure out how to target people and get all their data and use all their PII. And so let's just be more honest about our actual feelings about privacy. And then, I think from a consumer-facing standpoint, I think privacy is a little bit of a BS thing because honestly, I think that consumers have been somewhat brainwashed to conflate privacy with targeted advertising. Like privacy in a lot of people's minds now just equals targeted advertising. I think mostly because of Apple, frankly, and Apple's advertising around privacy. And so I think just on both sides of this, I think there's a BS aspect on the consumer side that we need to educate consumers more about. And I think there's a BS aspect within our industry where we like just talk about privacy and it's like we like really mean it and we really care deeply about user privacy, and even we conflate privacy with targeted advertising. But we need to be smarter, right? We're in this space. We need to actually call it out for what it is and where the real impact is and how we should be cautious about it and how we should be educating consumers about it. So we're concluding our webinar today. Thank you to our awesome panelists. Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Digital Advertising, for a great conversation. Thank you to the audience for joining us. Hopefully this was a valuable use of your time. Hopefully you took away a thing or two that you can apply to your strategies. Thank you, StackAdapt, for pulling this webinar together, this fantastic group together here today. Again, hopefully this was valuable for everybody. Have a great 2025. Have a successful year. And hopefully we'll see you again and we'll do this again next year. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.